What if every missing person's case file appeared in a book, and one of them had your name on it? That question slammed into my brain the night I wandered into the library basement. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just a quiet place to study, away from the noise of campus. But what I found instead still makes my chest tighten every time I think about it. It started like this: the university library was closing, the lights dimming, the sound of carts squeaking as staff reshelved books. I should have left with the rest of the stragglers, but I lingered. Finals week had me stretched thin, jittery from too much coffee, and desperate for quiet. I slipped down a corridor I'd never noticed before, a narrow passage tucked between two tall shelves of philosophy texts. The air there was colder, the light buzzing faintly overhead. At the end of the passage was a heavy oak door. No sign, no handle, just a brass keyhole and a thin seam down the middle. Out of pure impulse, I pushed. To my surprise, it groaned open, revealing a steep staircase curling into darkness. My phone flashlight barely reached the bottom. I knew I should have turned back. But something in me, a restless curiosity, maybe a little madness from sleep deprivation, pushed me forward. The air grew heavier as I descended. The smell shifted too, from the familiar musk of paper to something damp, metallic, like old pennies. At the bottom, the staircase opened into a cavernous room lined with shelves, thousands of them, stretching farther than I could see. My phone light flickered, then steadied, revealing row upon row of books. They weren't organized like the rest of the library. No Dewey Decimal labels, no categories. Each spine bore only a name. Just a single name, written in stark black ink on pale leather. I reached out, running a finger along the titles. Eleanor Price. Marcus Hall. Natalie Ortega. All names, nothing more. The silence pressed down on me until I thought I might choke. My pulse hammered as I pulled one book free. Its cover was soft, almost too soft, like worn skin. The pages inside were handwritten, dense with looping cursive. The first entry read like a diary. March 5, 1979. Eleanor Price, age 26. Last seen leaving her job at the bakery. I flipped further. March 10, Eleanor did not return home. Witnesses claim she was walking near the riverbank. My throat tightened. Every page documented Eleanor's life in eerie detail, down to the last night she was seen. The final entry was short, chilling. Eleanor Price disappeared without a trace. Case unsolved. The page was stained, as if with water or tears. Hands shaking, I shoved the book back into place and grabbed another. Marcus Hall. A similar story. His childhood, his family, his hobbies. And then, the vanishing. Every book I opened ended the same way, a life neatly recorded, then snuffed out in mystery. The sheer weight of it hit me. This was a library of missing people. Every unsolved case, every person who'd slipped from the world, bound and shelved. I stumbled backward, breath ragged. My flashlight beam swung wildly across the rows until it landed on something that froze me in place. A book with my name on it. Ethan Graves. I don't remember moving, but suddenly the book was in my hands. The cover was warm, almost pulsing. My vision tunneled as I cracked it open. The first page was in the same handwriting. September 12, 2002. Ethan Graves, born to Thomas and Laura Graves in a small town hospital. My chest clenched. This was me. My birthday, my parents, my details. Page after page charted my life with terrifying precision, childhood memories, high school heartbreaks, even private moments I'd never told a soul. The further I flipped, the colder my blood ran. November 14, 2022. Ethan skips class, wanders the library at night. He discovers a hidden staircase. I staggered, bile rising in my throat. The entry was dated today. The next page was blank. No words. No ending. Just empty paper, waiting. And that's when I heard it. A sound like a pen scratching across a page. Not from my hand. From somewhere deeper in the library. My phone light flickered, threatening to go out. The scratching grew louder, steady, deliberate. Someone, or something, was writing. And I had the sickening certainty it was writing my ending. I clutched the book to my chest and backed away, eyes darting across the shelves. The scratching stopped. The silence returned, heavier than before. And then a voice whispered from the darkness, low and close, right behind me. You weren't supposed to find it yet. I froze, every muscle in my body tightening as though my own skin were trying to trap me. The voice wasn't loud, it was soft, a whisper that carried more weight than any shout ever could. It came from just over my shoulder, so close I could almost feel the breath, though the air around me was colder than ice. My phone light trembled in my hand, beam shivering across the shelves, but no one was there. The whisper had been so distinct, so certain, that I knew I hadn't imagined it. My chest rose and fell in shallow, jagged breaths as I spun slowly in place, every nerve on fire, waiting for a face to emerge from the dark. But the rows of books remained silent, unmoving. The book in my hands, my book, felt heavier than before, as though it had gained weight in the few seconds since I opened it. My palms were slick with sweat, the leather slipping slightly beneath my grip. I wanted to drop it, to hurl it away and run back up the stairs, but something about it clung to me. It wasn't just a record of my life, it was me. And abandoning it felt like tearing my soul out of my chest and leaving it behind. The silence stretched, broken only by the faint buzz of my dying flashlight. I forced myself to take a step backward, then another, eyes locked on the endless rows. My foot caught on something, and I nearly went sprawling. The light dipped low and revealed the object, a chair. Not the library's usual worn-out study chairs, but an old wooden thing with carved arms and spindly legs, sitting perfectly in the middle of the aisle as though waiting for someone. The air shifted. I knew without turning that someone was now in the chair. I raised the light, breath caught in my throat. An old man sat there, slouched but somehow regal, his hands folded neatly atop a cane carved with twisting letters I couldn't read. His skin was pale and lined, like parchment stretched too thin, and his eyes, my God, his eyes, were the color of dust, milky and clouded, yet they seemed to pierce me to the marrow. You shouldn't be here, boy, he rasped, voice crackling like the turning of a burl page. Not yet. My throat was too dry to answer. The words that spilled from me weren't brave or clever, they were the only ones I could manage. What is this place? The man's lips curled into a thin smile. His teeth were too many, too sharp, and too white against his papery skin. The archive, he said simply. Every life that slips between the cracks, every story that ends without being found, we keep them here. We keep them safe. He leaned forward, the wood of the chair creaking beneath his weight. But you've seen what you should not. He gestured lazily with one finger at the book pressed against my chest. My stomach knotted, bile stinging the back of my throat. Why is there a book with my name? I managed to croak. The man chuckled, low and humorless. Every soul earns its place here in time. Some sooner, some later. You weren't meant to know yours yet. To read the end before it's written is unwise. His tone grew heavier, darker, the words dragging through the silence like chains. And to hear the pen before the last page is finished, he shook his head, clucking his tongue. That is dangerous indeed. The scratching. My skin prickled as I remembered it, that dreadful sound echoing somewhere in the stacks. Who's writing it? I asked before I could stop myself. The man's smile faltered, his cloudy eyes narrowing. Not who, he whispered. What? For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The shelves seemed to bend inward, the shadows thickening between them until the books themselves were swallowed in black. I wanted to bolt, to run blindly back to the staircase, but my body wouldn't move. His eyes pinned me there like an insect beneath glass. Finally, he rose. His cane tapped the floor, sharp and deliberate, as he shuffled closer. He smelled of dust and mildew, of long-forgotten pages. When he reached me, he placed a withered hand on the book I clutched. His fingers were unnaturally cold. "Take care, Ethan Graves," he said, my name twisting in his mouth like something sour. "Do not let the ink run too quickly. Once the final line is written, you will join them." His hand swept outward, gesturing to the endless shelves. "And the library does not give back what it takes." My knees buckled, the weight of his words sinking into me like a stone into water. He leaned closer, his lips nearly brushing my ear. "Leave now. Before it notices you." My flashlight flickered violently, plunging the room into momentary blackness. When the beam returned, the man was gone. The chair was empty. But the scratching, God, the scratching, had started again. Louder this time. Closer. I clutched the book tighter and turned toward the stairs, forcing my legs to move, forcing myself not to look back. My heart pounded as I stumbled through the darkness, every step echoing far too loudly, as though the library itself were listening. And then, just as I reached the base of the staircase, I heard it, the sound of a page turning. But I hadn't turned it. I froze on the bottom step, one hand gripping the railing so tightly the metal cut into my palm. The sound of the page turning wasn't mine. I hadn't moved. I hadn't touched the book. Yet the noise was unmistakable, the delicate rasp of paper sliding against paper, deliberate and slow, like someone savoring the act. My breath shuddered in my chest as I looked down at the book still clutched against me. The leather cover seemed warmer than before, almost fever-hot. Against every screaming instinct, I lifted the cover and peered inside. The blank page, the one I had seen earlier, wasn't blank anymore. In thick, black handwriting, words had appeared. November 14th, 2022. Ethan hears the page turn. He opens the book and reads what he was not meant to see. My stomach dropped, an icy hollowness flooding through me. These weren't old entries anymore. These weren't distant accounts written decades ago. This was now. Hands trembling, I flipped to the next page. New words had already spread across it like ink bleeding into fabric. Ethan climbs the staircase, but the library does not let him leave. I snapped the book shut so hard the sound cracked through the silence. My chest heaved, my thoughts scrambled. If this book was writing my present, then my choices weren't mine at all. It already knew what I would do. Or worse, it was deciding for me. The scratching sound returned, louder now, like a quill dragged too hard across paper. It wasn't distant anymore. It was coming from above, from the very staircase I needed to climb to get out. The sound echoed down the steps, slow and steady, as if someone was waiting at the top, writing with every breath I took. I backed away from the staircase, clutching the book like a shield, my eyes darting frantically around the endless aisles. The shelves stretched on forever, disappearing into blackness. I thought of the old man, the so-called librarian, who had warned me. Leave now. Before it notices you. But what if it was too late? What if it already had? I forced myself to look at the book again. My pulse thundered as I opened it with reluctant fingers. Another line had appeared, scrawled so darkly it looked burned into the page. Ethan runs deeper into the library. I didn't want to. Every fiber of me screamed to run up the stairs, to bash the door open and never look back. But even as I thought it, my feet betrayed me. My body moved on its own, carrying me away from the staircase, away from escape, and deeper into the library's labyrinth. The shelves seemed to close in around me as I stumbled forward, their spines like rows of unblinking eyes. My light faltered, flickering in uneven bursts that left more darkness than illumination. Every time the beam cut out, I swore the shelves shifted, their angles wrong, their lengths stretching farther than before. I tried to stop. I dug my heels into the floor, pressed my back against a shelf, fought against the pull. But the book grew heavier in my arms, dragging me forward like an anchor tethered to something unseen. My legs shook, yet they kept moving. I shouted, my voice cracking in the silence. I won't go. You can't make me. The words vanished into the endless dark. The scratching stopped. For a heartbeat, there was nothing, no sound, no movement, only my ragged breaths echoing far too loudly. I dared to hope, dared to think maybe I had broken whatever hold the book had. Then, directly in front of me, a book slid itself free from the shelf and fell to the floor with a heavy, echoing thud. I jumped, nearly dropping my own book. My light swept over the fallen volume, illuminating its pale leather spine. Slowly, dread curdling my insides, I lowered the beam. The name on it wasn't mine. It was Claire Daniels. I hesitated, frozen in place. My brain screamed at me not to touch it, to keep walking, to leave it there and never learn what was inside. But my hands acted on their own, as though the book itself pulled at my fingers. I bent down, lifted it, and flipped it open. The entries were familiar, a life documented in obsessive detail. Childhood games, teenage heartbreaks, the smell of her grandmother's perfume. And then, the end. June 3, 2018. Claire Daniels takes a late-night walk. She does not come home. The last line made my throat close. November 14, 2022. Claire Daniels' book is found by Ethan Graves. The ink was fresh. The book slipped from my hands and fell to the floor with a hollow smack. I staggered back, eyes wide, heart hammering against my ribs. That date, that was tonight. That was now. Which meant she was. A soft sound cut me off. Not the scratching this time. Something worse. A low, choked sob echoing between the shelves. I spun, light shaking violently in my grip. The sound came again, closer this time, a woman's broken sobs, trembling and wet with despair. And then, through the wavering light, I saw her. A girl standing at the end of the aisle. Pale. Barefoot. Eyes wide with terror. Her lips trembled as she spoke. Please, help me. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. The figure at the end of the aisle stood deathly still, her arms hanging limply at her sides, her bare feet pale against the stone floor. My trembling flashlight beam wavered across her, illuminating the gaunt hollows of her face, the tangled snarl of her hair, and the unmistakable shimmer of tears tracking down her cheeks. She wasn't a shadow or a trick of my exhausted mind, she was there. Her lips trembled again before parting. Please, help me. The words were so faint, so fragile, I wasn't even sure they belonged to her. They sounded like something carried on the wind, whispered through the shelves by unseen mouths. Yet her eyes, those wide, terrified eyes, were locked on mine with desperate intent. Every instinct I had screamed to run. To turn back, to find the staircase, to claw my way to the surface no matter what waited at the top. But something about the way she stood, the way her shoulders trembled with restrained sobs, anchored me to the spot. She wasn't a monster. She wasn't the faceless thing I'd half expected to emerge from the darkness. She was a girl. A person. My voice cracked when I spoke. Claire? The name left my lips before I could stop it, pulled straight from the book I'd just read. Her reaction was instant, her entire body shuddered, her tear-soaked face twisting into something between recognition and horror. She took a shaky step forward, then froze, as though the invisible weight of the shelves chained her where she stood. You, her voice faltered, thin and broken, as though she hadn't used it in years. You can see me? The question dug into my chest like a claw. Can see me? The phrasing twisted in my mind, unspoken implications uncoiling like snakes. Did that mean others had walked past her before, blind to her existence? Or worse, did it mean she wasn't supposed to be visible at all? I tightened my grip on my own book until my knuckles blanched white. My mouth felt like sand, but I forced myself to answer. Yes. I can see you. Her face crumpled. For a heartbeat, she looked almost relieved, as though those words alone gave her a tether to reality she hadn't felt in a long time. But then her expression shifted, the relief drowned by dread. She glanced behind her, into the endless darkness of the shelves, and her body tensed as though something loomed there just beyond the reach of my light. You shouldn't be here, she whispered, her voice breaking like shattered glass. It doesn't let you leave once it sees you. The words sank into me like ice water. My skin prickled, every hair standing on end. I swallowed, forcing the question out though my throat rebelled. What is it? Claire shook her head violently, tears flying from her cheeks, her tangled hair whipping across her face. Don't say its name. Don't even think about it. That's how it knows. That's how it writes you. Her trembling fingers lifted, pointing toward the book clutched against me. That's why you can't let go. It's writing you right now. I looked down at the leather cover, heat radiating against my chest like a brand. A sickening thought clawed into my mind. Every step I'd taken, every choice I thought was mine, had they been? Or was I just following a script written in real time by something watching from the shadows? Claire staggered closer, her feet dragging against the stone floor, each step sounding too heavy for her frail frame. Please, she begged, her voice raw, don't read it anymore. The more you do, the deeper it pulls you in. Her plea hit me with a terrible weight, but before I could respond, the sound came again. The scratching. It started faintly at first, like a pen nib pressed lightly against paper. Then louder, faster, more urgent, filling the aisle until it drowned everything else. The sound seemed to crawl up the walls, slither into the shelves, and echo inside my skull. I clutched my head, teeth gritted, feeling like the noise was burrowing straight into my thoughts. Claire's face twisted in terror. She stumbled backward, her gaze fixed on the ceiling, her mouth opening in a silent scream. Her hands clawed at her throat as if the sound itself were strangling her. I looked up. The light from my flashlight wavered across the ceiling beams high above, and for the briefest, most gut-wrenching instant, I saw it. A shape hunched in the rafters. Limbs too long, bent at impossible angles. A head bowed low over a massive book, quill scratching furiously across pages that seemed to stretch on without end. Its face was hidden, buried in shadow, but I could feel its eyes, all of them, turning toward me. The scratching stopped. And in that silence, Claire's voice came again, ragged and broken, not spoken to me but screamed like a prayer. Run. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I just ran. My shoes pounded against the cold stone floor, the echo chasing me as hard as whatever lurked in the rafters. The aisle seemed endless, stretching longer the faster I pushed forward, the books around me warping and groaning as though the very shelves disapproved of my escape. My flashlight beam jittered across the rows, throwing restless shadows that seemed to reach for me with claw-like fingers. Behind me, I could still hear Claire's ragged scream, a sound that twisted into something unnatural, as though it were being torn apart by the scratching of that quill. I wanted to look back, to see if she was still there, if she was safe, but every instinct inside me screamed that turning around meant becoming part of that book faster. The library wanted me distracted. It wanted me afraid. My lungs burned, but I kept running until I slammed into a corner, an impossible one. The aisle that had stretched into infinity just moments ago had ended abruptly, the shelves turning sharply left. My shoulder smashed into the wood, and the impact rattled my bones. Gasping, I pressed myself flat against the shelf and dared a glance over my shoulder. The aisle was empty. The place where Claire had stood was swallowed in blackness. The scratching had stopped. The silence that followed wasn't relief, it was worse. It was the kind of silence that felt like someone holding their breath right beside your ear, waiting for you to move first. I shoved myself forward, forcing my legs to carry me down the new aisle. This one was narrower, the shelves closer together, books jutting out as though trying to trip me. The air was different here, heavier, thick with the smell of mildew and something sharp, like copper. My light caught glimpses of things etched into the spines, symbols, runes, markings and languages I didn't know, some of which seemed to writhe when I stared too long. Halfway down the aisle, I slowed. Not because I wanted to, but because the shelves themselves were moving. At first, I thought it was my dizziness from running, but no, the wood groaned, and the entire row shifted, grinding across the stone floor. The shelves closed in, narrowing the aisle until I had to squeeze sideways, my shoulders scraping against splintered wood. I panicked, shoving against the books, but they didn't budge. The shelves kept moving, pressing tighter, until I was trapped between them, wedged in place like an insect pinned under glass. My flashlight beam jerked across the spines, hundreds of names. Names I didn't recognize, written in different hands, some faded, some fresh. And then I saw it. My name. Etched across 3 different spines, on 3 separate books, all shoved against my chest as though the shelves had closed in deliberately to show me. Each had a different subtitle beneath: disappearance, return, ending. I couldn't breathe. My trembling fingers reached out, brushing the spine of the first, Ethan Cole, disappearance. The leather was warm, almost pulsing, like it had a heartbeat of its own. The shelves shuddered violently, knocking me back, and then split apart again, as if deciding not to crush me just yet. I stumbled free, gasping, heart pounding so hard I thought my ribs might crack. My flashlight flickered, the beam sputtering across the floor like it was running out of power. And then, footsteps. Soft, deliberate, too even to be mine. They came from the next aisle over, pacing slowly, measured like someone who knew I was listening. My chest tightened as I held my breath, crouching low, trying to still the ragged sound of my lungs. The steps grew closer, pausing at the corner just ahead. Whoever, or whatever, it was waiting. A shadow spilled across the floor, long and distorted by the angle of my beam. My skin crawled as the shape elongated unnaturally, stretching across the aisle until it almost touched me. My fingers dug into the cover of my book like it was a weapon, though I knew it wasn't. The silence stretched, unbearable. And then, a voice, low, rasping, but familiar. "Why are you reading my story?" The sound nearly stopped my heart. It was Claire's voice, but warped, as though it were being read aloud from a page instead of spoken by a living person. The shadow shifted, growing taller, closer. I didn't wait. I lunged down the opposite direction, sprinting into the darkness. The shelves around me groaned and shifted again, the very floor tilting under my feet as though the library itself was trying to shake me off. My light swung wildly, illuminating corners that hadn't been there a second ago, stairways that led nowhere, doors that dissolved into shelves when I reached for them. The library wasn't just a place. It was alive. And it wanted me lost. As I stumbled forward, I caught sight of something ahead, a break in the endless shelves. An open chamber, wide and dimly lit by a chandelier of candles dripping with black wax. In the center stood a table, and on it, another book. Unlike the others, this one was enormous, bound in cracked skin like leather, chains wrapping its cover. My gut twisted even before I reached it, because deep down, I already knew what it was. The master book. The one the creature had been writing in. And as I stepped closer, the chains rattled on their own, the book quivering like something inside wanted out. My flashlight dimmed further, sputtering to near black, and in the faint flicker of light, I saw words searing themselves across the cover. Ethan Cole, the ending. The sight of my name carved into that monstrous tome rooted me to the floor. My mind screamed to run, to get away before whatever force had chained the book noticed me standing there, but my body disobeyed. The pull was too strong. My name didn't just sit there, it glowed faintly, burning against the cracked leather like it had been waiting for me. Like it needed me to see it. The room smelled of burnt paper and candle wax, the air heavy with the metallic bite of ink. The chandelier above sputtered, shadows of the wax drips sliding down the walls like black veins. I felt watched, not from the shadows this time, but from the book itself. Its cover flexed almost imperceptibly, like lungs beneath a ribcage. The chains rattled again, not because of my touch, but in rhythm with something unseen, like the heartbeat of the library itself. I forced myself forward, one unsteady step at a time. My sneakers squeaked faintly against the polished stone floor, and each sound ricocheted around the chamber like gunfire. I kept my eyes locked on the book, unwilling to glance behind me, unwilling to look anywhere else. If I broke eye contact with it, I feared it would move closer on its own. When I reached the table, I placed a trembling hand on the cool wood surface to steady myself. My other hand clutched the smaller book, the one I had taken from the aisle, the one that had started this. I realized then how light it felt compared to the massive tome before me, like I'd been carrying a cheap imitation, a draft copy. This one was the original. The chains groaned as I leaned closer. On the cover, beneath my name, new words began to scrawl themselves in a hurried, frantic script. My breath caught in my throat as I realized they weren't just random sentences, they were describing me, right now. He stands over the master book, breath shallow, hand trembling, trapped between flight and curiosity. The words wrote themselves as I read them. Ink bled through the leather as though a quill were scratching from inside. I staggered back, heart pounding, but the script continued, relentless, recording every twitch, every flicker of thought. He does not yet understand that the book is not writing him, he is writing the book. My pulse skipped. That sentence dug under my skin like a hook. My stomach lurched. Not writing him, he is writing the book. I wanted to deny it, to shout that it wasn't true, but the memory of the shelves flashing my name across multiple spines clawed back into my mind. Disappearance. Return. Ending. What if the library didn't predict me? What if I was feeding it, fueling it, with every step I took? The chamber suddenly felt too small, the air thick and choking. My flashlight gave a final flicker before dying completely, plunging the room into a sickly glow cast only by the black wax candles. Their flames sputtered in unison, bending inward as though something enormous had just entered the room, unseen. I wasn't alone. I gripped the smaller book to my chest, desperate for something, anything familiar. And that's when I realized, I wasn't holding the same book I'd grabbed earlier. The cover was different now. The leather was darker, the spine thicker, the pages swollen with words that hadn't been there before. I opened it with shaking hands, and my breath hitched. The first page wasn't about Claire anymore. It wasn't about anyone else. It was about me. All of me. My childhood in Montana. The way my mother used to hum in the kitchen while she cooked. The time I broke my arm falling off a bike when I was 9. Things no one else could possibly know. The library had my life, all of it, and it was writing faster than I could turn the pages. My eyes darted down to the last line written so far. He reaches the chamber and sees himself reflected not in the candle flames, but in the dark glass of the chained book. Slowly, mechanically, like a puppet, I lifted my gaze to the master book. The chains parted slightly, a seam opening across the cover. The leather peeled back just enough to reveal a surface beneath, not paper, but glass, black and glossy like a mirror. And staring back at me wasn't my reflection. It was me, yes, but thinner. Hollow-cheeked. Eyes sunken, lips cracked. My reflection opened its mouth, and though no sound came, I understood the words perfectly. They were forming in my mind at the exact same moment ink bled across the page inside my book. Trade places. The glass rippled like liquid. My reflection's hand pressed against the inside of the mirror, fingertips sharp and skeletal. My own hand lifted instinctively to meet it, no matter how much I screamed inside my head not to. The library wasn't just showing me a story, it was trying to complete it. The candles guttered all at once, plunging the chamber into near black. Only the faint glow of ink writing itself remained. The words bled across the cover of the master book, glowing faintly in the dark. Ethan Cole, The Exchange. The word exchange seared itself into my brain, glowing faintly on the chained book like it was written in fire under the leather. The reflection in the dark glass pressed harder, the liquid surface rippling outward with each movement until it looked as though the thing inside would spill into the chamber any second. My breath came in short, ragged bursts, and my body shook so violently I could barely keep my grip on the smaller book. The reflection, no, the other me, smiled faintly. It was the kind of smile that didn't belong on my face, one stretched just slightly too wide, too confident, like it knew how this would end. Its lips moved again. The words were silent in the air, but loud inside my skull, as if the library itself whispered them directly into my thoughts. Trade places. Just one touch. My fingers hovered a hair's breadth away from the glass. My arm didn't feel like my own anymore, it was heavy, numb, guided by an unseen force. Every ounce of my will screamed to pull away, to run, but the library seemed to press down on me from all sides, suffocating, squeezing until the only way out appeared to be through. The glass rippled again, and suddenly, the reflection's eyes rolled white. Its skin cracked at the corners of its mouth as if it were splitting open. Black ink dribbled down its chin, thick and slow, soaking into the glass like tar. My stomach twisted. This wasn't me. This wasn't anything human. It was a shadow wearing my shape. I ripped my hand back at the last possible second, staggering a few steps away from the table. The reflection's smile collapsed into a snarl, the thing inside slamming its palm against the glass hard enough to send spiderweb cracks across the surface. The sound echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. Immediately, the shelves surrounding the room groaned and shifted, their weight grinding against stone. Dust rained down from the ceiling as if the whole library resented my refusal. My candlelight dimmed, the flames shrinking as though suffocated by an unseen hand. The chains on the master book rattled violently, straining, tightening, desperate to hold whatever was inside from breaking free. Then I heard it, the scratching again. Faster this time, furious, 1,000 quills dragging across 1,000 pages at once. It poured into my skull like fire, searing behind my eyes. I collapsed to my knees, clutching my head, teeth clenched against a scream. And beneath the scratching, faint but unmistakable, came the sound of pages turning themselves. I forced my gaze down to the smaller book in my hand, terrified of what I'd see. And sure enough, the pages were flipping wildly, faster than I could stop them, words searing across them in jagged handwriting. I forced the book closed, but it burned in my grip, vibrating violently, begging to be read. The reflection spoke again, this time louder, clearer, and it was no longer confined to my head. Its voice rattled the walls of the chamber, deep and hollow, echoing like it came from inside every book in the library. You don't belong out there. You belong here. One of us must take the place of the other. The words clawed at something deep inside me, a strange, nauseating sense that maybe it was right. Maybe I had always been destined to end here, inside these shelves, just like Claire, just like the names etched across those spines. What if the outside world was just the draft, and this library was the final version? I staggered back, my heel striking something solid. At first, I thought it was just the edge of the table, but no. A hand. Cold, brittle fingers curled around my ankle. I let out a strangled yell, whipping the flashlight toward it. Claire. Her body lay half sprawled against the floor, her face pale, her eyes clouded, lips cracked and bloodless. But she was still alive. Barely. Her hand clung to my ankle with desperate strength. Her voice was little more than a rasp, like air forced through broken glass. Don't touch it. That's what it wants. It doesn't want the story to end. Her grip weakened, her arm trembling violently as though the effort of speaking alone was draining what little she had left. I dropped to my knees beside her, trying to pull her upright, but she shook her head, strands of matted hair sticking to her damp cheeks. "You can't save me," she croaked. "But you can save yourself. Close it. Don't let it finish writing you." Her eyes flicked toward the smaller book clutched against my chest. The implication hit me like ice water. She wasn't telling me to close the master book. She was telling me to close my book. The one that had followed me since I first opened it. But how? I could feel the thing vibrating in my hands like a living heart, the pages flipping even though I tried to pin them shut. The library itself seemed to resist me, invisible tendrils prying at my fingers, demanding I let it open, demanding I keep reading. The reflection slammed its fists against the glass again, the cracks deepening, black ink leaking freely now and dripping onto the table. It was coming through, whether I wanted it to or not. And in that moment, as the room shook, as Claire's hand slipped from mine, as the reflection's face pressed closer to breaking through, the book in my hands snapped open on its own. The last line written on the page made my blood run cold. "He closes the book too late." The words glowed on the page like a prophecy already fulfilled. "He closes the book too late." My stomach lurched as though gravity had suddenly inverted, my insides hollowing out. I snapped the book shut anyway, clamping my hands around the covers with all the strength I had left, but the act felt pitifully symbolic. The story wasn't mine to stop, it had been moving toward this moment long before I ever set foot in the library. The reflection in the master book's glass threw its head back in a soundless laugh, the cracks spiderwebbing further across the surface. Its face distorted as though being pulled through tar, ink dripping in viscous ropes that splattered across the table and hissed when they hit the stone floor. The smell was unbearable, burnt paper mixed with rot, a stench that coated the back of my throat and made me gag. Claire convulsed beside me, her body shuddering violently as though something inside her was being ripped free. She clutched her chest with both hands, her nails digging into her skin, blood blooming through the thin fabric of her shirt. Her eyes rolled back, her jaw locked in a silent scream, and then she collapsed, her breathing shallow but frantic. I wanted to help her, to drag her away from the table, but the floor shifted beneath my feet. The whole chamber quaked, the chandelier overhead swinging wildly, flinging molten wax against the walls like spattered blood. The shelves surrounding us groaned, and books began to spill out in an avalanche of leather and parchment, their spines cracking open midair, words bleeding from their pages like veins split open. Every book screamed. Not in words, not in voices I could understand, but in the collective moan of thousands of lives being replayed, rewritten, torn apart. It was like standing in the middle of a hurricane of human suffering, each scream embedding itself into my bones. The master book's chains snapped one by one, each metallic crack reverberating through the chamber like the tolling of a funeral bell. The final chain recoiled violently, clattering to the floor, and the book sprang open with a thunderous boom that shook dust from the ceiling. The glass surface inside was no longer a mirror. It was a doorway. My reflection stepped through. Ink dripped from its feet as it emerged, its body gaunt and stretched, bones protruding through thin skin like a corpse resurrected. Its eyes were solid black, yet I knew it could see me perfectly. It grinned again, the same two-eyed grin I had seen before, but now in the flesh. My flesh. For a paralyzing second, we just stared at each other, the world narrowing to that impossible confrontation. It was me, and yet it wasn't. It had all of my features but none of my hesitation, none of my doubt. It carried itself with the confidence of something that already knew the ending. It spoke with my voice, but lower, hollow, soaked in ink. You were never meant to leave. Only one version of you gets to exist outside these pages. My grip tightened around the smaller book, my lifeline. My knuckles burned white. But it was still vibrating, still alive in my hands, demanding to be opened, demanding to be read. I realized then the horrible truth: this was the choice the library was forcing on me. If I opened it, if I read, I'd surrender. The reflection would step fully into me, take my place in the world outside. If I resisted, the book would finish me anyway, closing my story with or without my permission. The reflection lunged. Its hand clamped around my throat with a force that felt volcanic, ink seeping from its palm and burning my skin like acid. I gasped, struggling, my vision flashing white. My free hand clawed at its wrist, but it was like grabbing wet iron, unyielding and slick with poison. My smaller book slipped from my grip, hitting the floor with a sickening thud, its pages flying open. And there it was, written in real time as my lungs screamed for air. He struggles, but he cannot break free. He falls to the ground. He fades. No! The word ripped from my chest, more primal than conscious, my voice scraping raw. My hand shot toward the book, slamming it shut again. The pages screamed in protest, a shrill sound like tearing metal filling the chamber. The reflection faltered. Just slightly, but enough. Its grip loosened, its head jerking as though confused, disoriented. Its grin faltered, the ink in its eyes swirling like smoke disturbed by wind. I shoved back with everything I had, breaking free from its grip and staggering toward the smaller book. My chest heaved as I collapsed over it, clutching it desperately, ignoring the burning welts on my neck where its fingers had seared me. Claire's voice, weak but insistent, broke through the chaos. Burn it. I spun to her. Her eyes fluttered half shut, her lips pale, but she was pointing, not at the master book, but at mine. Burn it, before it finishes you. I stared down at the thing in my hands. The leather cover quivered under my touch, like a heartbeat trying to escape. The words on the edges of the pages still glowed faintly, waiting, begging for the next line to be written. Behind me, the reflection let out a guttural roar, its voice like tearing parchment. The shelves around us convulsed, books exploding open, their words spilling out like streams of black smoke. The whole library was shaking now, dust falling in thick curtains from the ceiling. I looked at the candles, their black wax still dripping in molten streams. Fire. That's what she meant. That was the only way. But as I stumbled toward the chandelier, clutching the book like a parasite I couldn't shake, a single thought stabbed into my brain. What if burning it burns me too? The thought wouldn't leave my head. What if burning the book burns me too? It echoed in my skull louder than the tremors shaking the chamber. The master book loomed behind me, its doorway of black glass pulsing with light, my reflection clawing its way fully into this world. The library itself groaned and shuddered as though it resented my hesitation, the shelves collapsing inward, vomiting books across the floor in a storm of cracked spines and shredded pages. I stumbled toward the candelabrum, my legs like lead, clutching the book to my chest as though strangling the life out of it. The leather felt feverishly hot, alive, its heartbeat syncing with mine until I could no longer tell which pulse was mine and which belonged to it. My lungs fought for breath, every inhale thick with dust and the acrid stink of molten wax. The reflection roared again, a sound so deep it rattled my teeth in their sockets. I risked a glance back and saw it advancing, every step trailing rivers of ink that sizzled as they hit the floor. Its face was twisting now, distorting, warping as though it was shedding my likeness piece by piece, growing into something rawer, darker. The grin had stretched impossibly wide, splitting into fissures that oozed more black fluid. Claire was crumpled against the far wall, still conscious but fading fast. Her voice was a whisper now, trembling with urgency. "Ethan, you don't have time. Burn it, or it'll write the rest." Her words struck me like a verdict. My fingers trembled as I held the book out toward the candle flame. The heat licked at the edge of the cover, teasing, daring me to push further. My body screamed in resistance, burning it felt like peeling away a piece of myself. My thoughts blurred in a haze of panic and dread. If this is my story, then maybe destroying it means destroying me. But then I heard it. The pages had started writing again. My head whipped down, and sure enough, glowing words scrawled across the open paper at terrifying speed, as though an invisible quill raced to capture my every moment. I didn't have to read far to understand the intent. He hesitates. He cannot do it. The reflection takes him. No, my voice cracked, weak and desperate. I shoved the book closer to the flame, but something inside me revolted, a primal instinct pulling my hand back, fighting me. My vision swam, and for a horrifying moment, I realized it wasn't just instinct, it was the book itself. It wanted to survive. Its leather rippled under my palm like muscle tightening against restraint. It didn't want to burn. The reflection lunged. I barely dodged, stumbling forward. Its arm swung past me, its clawed hand tearing deep gashes into the stone wall, sparks hissing where ink touched the surface. It snarled, inhuman now, a sound of pure hunger. I shoved the book directly into the flame. The reaction was instantaneous. The leather screamed. Not the book. Not me. The leather. The sound was an unholy wail that vibrated through my bones, 1,000 voices shrieking at once, begging, cursing, promising vengeance. The flame caught, climbing the cover like dry paper, black smoke curling upward in thick plumes. My hand shook violently, the heat blistering my skin, but I didn't let go. I couldn't. If I let it fall, if it extinguished, it might finish me before I had another chance. The reflection shrieked in tandem, its body spasming violently. Its ink-dripping form convulsed as though on fire too, black veins splitting open across its face and chest, light bursting through the cracks. It clawed at itself, ripping its own skin, as though tearing at invisible bindings. For the first time, its grin faltered, replaced by raw, animal panic. The fire spread faster now, licking into the pages, curling them into ash. The glowing words sputtered, distorted, then blackened into smoke that hissed upward into nothingness. The library shook so violently I thought the ceiling would come down on us. Shelves toppled like dominoes, books exploding into clouds of dust and embers. The chandelier above snapped free, crashing to the ground in a fiery burst of molten wax. I screamed through the heat, my skin blistering, but I forced myself to hold on until the book was nearly gone, the pages collapsing into cinders. And then, silence. It was abrupt. Total. The quaking stopped. The avalanche of books froze midair. The shelves stood still again. I blinked through the smoke and falling ash. The reflection was gone. No ink trails, no twisted grin, no warped double waiting to step into my life. Just empty stone floor, charred where it had stood. I dropped the last of the burning remains. My hands were raw, red, burned badly, but they were still mine. My breath came in ragged, shuddering gasps as I fell to my knees. Relief washed over me, but it was fragile, like thin glass. Then I heard something that cracked it wide open. A fluttering sound. Pages. Not from the ashes in front of me, but from behind, deep within the shelves. I turned slowly, dread already tightening around my throat like a vice. One book remained untouched. Standing upright on a single shelf, glowing faintly. Its cover was pristine, leather unburned, gold lettering etched across the spine. I didn't need to read it to know what it said. My name. Ethan Price. And this time, the book wasn't chained. It was waiting. The glowing book pulsed like a heartbeat. My name, Ethan Price, etched into the spine in shimmering gold, brighter and clearer than I had ever seen it. My legs felt numb as I dragged myself toward it, every nerve in my body screaming that this was wrong, that burning the chained book wasn't enough. The silence of the library was suffocating, as though every shelf, every forgotten soul bound to these pages, was holding its breath and waiting for me to act. Claire stirred behind me, coughing from the smoke. Ethan, she rasped, her voice thin and broken. Don't touch it. But how could I not? The pull was magnetic, almost physical, like a current dragging me forward. I reached the shelf, trembling, my burned hands hovering just inches from the cover. Heat radiated from it, not fire, but a living warmth, like blood pumping beneath skin. My fingers brushed the leather, and I felt it, the undeniable throb of a pulse, syncing with my own. The moment I touched it, the book opened itself. Pages fluttered in a storm, flipping faster than my eyes could follow, until they stopped on the middle. My breath caught in my throat as I saw the words, glowing faintly, written in the same cursed hand that had filled every other book. Ethan Price burns his story but does not escape it. He believes he has won, but his life has already been rewritten. My stomach twisted, bile rising in my throat. "No," I whispered. "No, I destroyed it. I." The ink on the page shifted. Like liquid, it rearranged itself into new sentences, lines writing themselves as I watched. Ethan Price reads these words and realizes he was never meant to leave. The book cannot be destroyed because the library cannot be destroyed. And neither can he. My hands shook uncontrollably, and I slammed the book shut, my chest heaving. But the words burned behind my eyes, carved into my memory. I could still hear them echoing, louder and louder, until they were no longer words but commands. Claire pulled herself up, limping, her face pale and streaked with blood. What did it say? I couldn't answer. The truth was already unraveling me. The library groaned again, but it was different this time, less like collapsing stone, more like breathing. The shelves stretched higher, their rows multiplying endlessly, spiraling upward into blackness. Every book glowed faintly now, their titles shimmering, each one a name, each one a story. Thousands. Millions. And in that endless sprawl, I saw it, my book wasn't alone. Multiple copies of it appeared on shelves all around, as if the moment I touched it, the story replicated itself. Dozens of Ethan Price spines glimmered in every direction, their glow multiplying until it drowned out the library in golden light. Claire fell to her knees. "Ethan, it's rewriting you." "No," I choked. "It can't," but even as I spoke, I felt it. My body didn't feel entirely mine anymore. My hands twitched unnaturally, jerking like a puppet's strings had been pulled. My burned skin smoothed over, healing in seconds, but the flesh beneath was wrong, too tight, too stretched, almost reflective. My vision wavered, double images overlaying each other, one of myself here and another of myself still trapped in those pages. The library whispered. Not one voice, but many. The whispers overlapped, a tide of sound pressing into my skull, chanting in languages I couldn't understand, until they merged into one message. You are part of us now. The books began to open in unison. Pages turned by invisible hands, words spilling into the air, glowing phrases spiraling upward like ribbons of smoke. I realized what I was seeing, the lives of countless missing people unfolding and replaying at once. Some were snuffed out mid-sentence, their light extinguishing abruptly. Others stretched on endlessly, repeating themselves like broken records. And among them, mine. I saw myself in fragments, burning the book, screaming at the reflection, collapsing in the ashes, running through the library halls. But then I saw other versions of me, ones that had never burned the book, ones where the reflection had taken over, ones where Claire was gone and I was left alone in the dark. Infinite versions of my story, all happening simultaneously, all contained in those endless shelves. My knees buckled as the truth clawed through me. This wasn't just a library of missing people. It was a prison of infinite loops, every book a cage where stories replayed forever. The missing weren't gone, they were here, trapped in the echo of their own endings, written and rewritten until nothing was left of them except words. And now, so was I. Claire screamed my name, but her voice was fading, distant, swallowed by the glow. My fingers moved without my will, clutching the book to my chest, holding it like it was my lifeline when in reality it was my tomb. The last thing I saw before darkness overtook me was her face, twisted in terror, as the shelves swallowed her too. The library shut like a closing eye. Silence. And then, pages fluttered. A new line appeared in my book. Ethan Price's story does not end. He becomes the librarian. My breath caught, but it was no longer mine. I stood, though I hadn't chosen to. My reflection stared back at me from the black glass, no longer grinning but calm, resolved. I was on both sides now. I was part of the shelves, part of the whispering voices, part of the endless loop. Somewhere, far above, I heard the heavy door of the library creak open. Footsteps echoed faintly. Another student. Another wanderer. Another name waiting to be written. I smiled without meaning to. The pen appeared in my hand, dripping with black ink. And I whispered into the dark. Welcome to the library.